I saw an empty hallway as I heard the event room closing. Upon realizing I'd lowered my guard, I sprinted as fast as I could. I entered the event room, but it was empty. By the time I opened the door to hallway B, I'd lost him. Every door around me was closed except the lobbies. I didn't know where he'd gone, but as soon as I picked the wrong path, Sai would escape. Running toward hallway C meant facing the task of searching through every floor, and going to the lobby meant that he could already have been in hallway A. Instead, I opened a bunch of doors in hallway B, hoping he'd taken shelter in one of them, as I couldn't hear the distant sound of running footsteps. They were all empty, and I didn't bother searching too deeply into them. I understood what Sai's business on that floor had been. He needed us to go there to have a chance at escaping, since he had no way of dodging me on the upper floors. I sighed. Perhaps I should have expected it, but I didn't blame myself too much. I'd lost Sai, and it appeared his goal had still been to escape from me. Just in case, I went to the security room where he'd said he wanted to go. It was empty, and the computer remained suspended. In a corner, I saw the suitcase that Kate had brought there from hallway C. What had Sai's deal been? Maybe I'd have a better idea once I went back to the attic, but Shiriya had yet to be found. I went to look at the computer's time, which read 12:18. I sat on the chair and sighed in exasperation for a few seconds. There were many things I could think about, but instead my mind went to something that hadn't stopped bugging me more as time went on. Sai's watch. More specifically, the date, 99991231. When I found Sai, he should have been in the attic. This means that it's very possible he traveled through time in some capacity, even though he kept denying it. If he did, his watch would have done the same. 99991231 hints at that even further. Being the highest date the watch could allow, it could be linked to another common concept related to time travel: loops. Looping through time, living the same portion of time over and over. I'm jumping to this thought not only because of the dates, but also because the battery had run out before the time it was supposed to. Well, it wasn't going to last 9,000 years either. If, for example, the watch is in the process of traveling from 1220 to the past until it reaches the travel points, the time displayed would increase per travel. If that's repeated infinite times, the date would eventually hit its maximum value and stay there. How many batteries do you think he stashed away in here? How many do you think he'd need? 1,000? If, when I saw the watch, it had repeated that process infinitely, the date could make a bit of sense. Similarly, every few years the battery would run out, so replacing it would allow the time to continue advancing. Well, yeah. So if something of the sort is what happened, is it a coincidence that I happened to experience the loop in which the battery had to be replaced? There would be times in which the watch would appear functional, and ones in which the date wouldn't have reached the year 9999 yet. All of those would have to reach the same loop point, which goes against the way I thought this worked, because traveling to the past would end up modifying it in different manners. And I suppose it's pointless to think about this, because a bunch of contradictions prevent such a thing from having happened. To begin with, if the wristwatch had traveled back an insane amount of times, it would have physically degraded. If it had survived at least the 8,000 years needed to reach 9,999, the metal would have appeared rusty, and it's hard to believe it wouldn't have just disintegrated instantly. Also, Sai had to be the one to bring it back through time, so he'd be older, and he couldn't have existed for the same number of years without dying. This would be circumvented if going to the past replicated your past body, but then the watch's date and time would reset after every travel. Lastly, this is not how the Sekimeiya works. If you travel 30 minutes to the past, during those 30 minutes, two versions of you exist at the same time. If Sai had traveled with his watch that many times, he would have created a new copy of himself each travel. He's got a cupboard somewhere where he's storing them. 200 Sais everywhere. That isn't all. Naturally, I'm thinking about this to justify the watch's date, but there's no apparent reason why Sai would travel back to the same spot more than once. And if somehow he could circumvent getting older, it would mean that after the point he traveled from, he couldn't exist anymore. If there is a point in time in which he always travels back, he could never make it past it. Despite that, I'm sure that if I go to the attic right now, I will see him. The origin of the Sai I was talking to a few minutes ago should give some insight on what occurred, but I'm not sure to what extent, since he himself seemed unaware of what had happened to his watch. Did the date go up to the year 9999 for no reason? Was it a little malfunction maybe? Tied with the battery's loss of power, it seems like a bit of a stretch to treat it as one. I mean, that seems like perfectly reasonable to treat it as one. The facts are as follows. Sai probably only traveled once because countless versions of himself didn't exist at the same time. The watch can't be in a regular time loop because the Sekimeiya doesn't work like that, and because the watch would physically degrade before reaching the year 9999. What if it just resets to that? In sort of factory condition, and yet the date had reached its highest possible value. I really feel that something of significance might be the cause behind it. One last important thing I can take from this is that if the watch's status was caused by Sai traveling to the past, adding that he was surprised to see it disabled and that it had been working at 11:36, it's possible that he hadn't yet traveled by that time. I also had to keep in mind that Sai must have had a reason to escape from me and that he'd been doing something before I'd seen him. The battery's power having run out also felt like it was very important, but I couldn't reach any conclusion regarding that. I shifted my focus. I had to find Shiriya, but I'd already looked through the crystal floor twice. Being in front of the computer made me think of the cameras. It was possible the system had restored, so I tried to see if I could do something with it and look at where Shiriya and Sai were. I clicked on the program with a security camera icon. The text, logged in as Kate Kuiji, was still on the bottom. When I noticed it, I wondered if Kate had left his account logged in to push that anyone could have made use of it. Next, I pressed Initialize Camera Monitoring, but as before, I was met with a message box containing the Couldn't Detect Video Footage text. Trying to look at the archived footage yielded no result either. On the lower right corner was a button that read Power System Off, but it was grayed out. It was a messy and hard to follow interface, so the only thing I recognized was a symbol of a wrench that was probably the settings menu. I clicked on it and a panel with many options appeared. One in particular caught my eye: Footage. A new screen appeared upon clicking on it, showing the path where the recordings could be found. The set path was B archived, which sounded simple enough. In case that the program was the cause of the issue, I went ahead and looked for that specific folder. B indicated that it wasn't saved on the main drive. I searched for it, but I couldn't find it. No extra drive appeared to exist whatsoever, so it made sense that the footage wasn't being detected. I kept looking, but to no avail. I performed a thorough search for the word archive, but none of the results interested me. The time had been passing fast, and I didn't want to waste more of it. The computer displayed 12:31. I stood up from a chair. I had to search through the entire floor, but going to the attic for aid might have been a better choice. Although I didn't think Shiriya would hide, searching alone was never ideal. Once I left the room, I was once again met with the cold silence of a desolate floor. The door closing behind me didn't echo as well as it should have been, because the smoke cover on the ceiling didn't allow the sound to bounce back properly. Despite that, I still noticed the sound of someone approaching from hallway C. It was Shiriya. As soon as she saw me, she sped up with a concerned face. As if I were her reflection, I reacted the same way. "Where were you? Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I've been on this floor for the most part. I was searching for you." "I went to the room where you said you returned to, but you weren't there." "You went there? You just had to wait." "No, right as you touched the Sekimeiya, I disappeared too." Those words came as a surprise, so I forced my breathing to remain normal. "You traveled too? At the same time?" "Why did I never see you then?" "Well, just as you touched it, I appeared on the second floor, inside the partitions. It was very strange, as if I changed places instantly. That's what happened to you too, right? I thought your travel might have somehow taken me along with you." I couldn't believe it was real. Talking about it and having it happen are two really different things. Where did it send you? "I appeared in the security room. Do you know how far back you went?" "I think so. I spent a few minutes sitting down since I could barely understand what had happened. Then I went to the attic to confirm I'd really traveled back in time. When I saw that the door was still locked, I figured it might have really happened. Eventually, I started to go back down until I heard sounds approaching me from below that made me hide on the 4th floor. It was a group of people, so I thought it must have been us when we first entered the attic. I thought I could go to the crystal floor to look at the time. I looked at the computer and estimated I'd gone back about 40 minutes. So you opened the door to the security room. We must have traveled the same amount of time then. I see. I was in the cleaning room when you came down, so we didn't see each other. The others returned and then went up again. Since I knew they were going to the attic, I followed them because I was very curious to see if everything was actually repeating. I didn't go up immediately, so when I got there, Sai and Kate were already in the bedroom. I entered and listened from the hallway, and they were saying the same things as before. I was so scared of being seen, Atsuki. If the past changes, do things just unravel? I have no idea. Nobody noticed me this entire time, so it was all consistent with the past that we know. I think nothing changed. Everything I experienced with people from the past was just me observing them without them knowing I was there, so nothing deviated. I even tried to change the past by saving the second Naomi, but it was useless. Anyway, Sai and Kate really didn't leave the attic, did they? I don't think so, no. I knew he'd be going down shortly, so I hid in the floor 6 partitions. I stayed there a while to avoid being seen by Akaro as he went up. Then I came here to meet with you, but you weren't in the room. I wasn't. I suppose I might have spent a few minutes with Sai in the lobby, but I thought you'd stay there. With Sai? But he was in the attic. What do you mean? I waited a bit in the room until I got worried something might have gone wrong. I saw the Sekimeiya too. It was still where we'd left it, but it had changed colors to the grey from before. 2 Sekimeiyas. So activating is what powers it off like that. We knew that. I guess we didn't know it, but that's not what you should be worrying about, Atsuki. Probably, but I didn't try to touch it again. I closed the glass of the cabinet before I looked around this floor briefly, and I thought that you might have gone back to the attic. I went there, but not much had seemed to change. I stayed in the hallway to listen to a conversation going on in the bedroom. Even if they'd seen me, it wouldn't have mattered much since we had just left from their perspective. At that point, Sai was still there, right? Yes, he was leading the conversation, telling the others not to follow us down. Akaro was there too, and he confirmed having seen us. Sai was telling them to wait for us because if something happened, we'd be the culprit since we'd left of our own volition. I see. So he wanted the others not to come down. That's what he kept saying. He never left and the elevator was still there with the door open. The conversation began to die down, and when they talked about going to the bathroom, I left right away so nobody would see me. I stayed in the living room for a couple minutes with the doors closed, but I think that they all took that time to go to the bathroom, so I started going down again since I still had to find you. I looked through every floor until I saw you right as I was about to start with this one. I suppose it makes sense we never saw each other. 5 minutes before the point we traveled from, I saw Sai on this floor. I thought he might have traveled from the future since he should have been upstairs. If he actually was there during that time, I must have been right in some way. He escaped from me more than 10 minutes ago, so I'm not sure where he is right now. Oh, I haven't seen him anywhere. So he didn't go up? Well, I looked inside every partition, so he might have been able to. I don't know what his goal was, but he's probably accomplished it by now. Regardless, the most important thing is that you were able to travel without touching the Sekimeiya. Not only that, but you went the same amount of time back. I thought that maybe I'd gone twice as far as my initial travel, but this shouldn't apply anymore since this was your first. And our locations were also different. I'm not sure why I appeared on the second floor. Yeah, it could be that it chooses random nearby locations, but that might be a bit of a stretch. It would mean that we could keep trying until we appeared outside the tower, but that recording didn't seem to indicate that will be possible. There's no way it was real though. 40 minutes before we traveled, both of us were together, moving down from the 5th floor. It can't be that where we appear is decided based on that position, or we would have appeared together. Yeah, I don't know. The amount of time traveled and the location might just be random. Both were different than the first time I traveled, but when I disappeared in front of all of you, nobody else traveled. Why did it affect you as well this time? I thought about this. I was a few steps behind, and I'm sure at least Sai was closer to you the first time. He was walking to you before you disappeared. But Sai didn't travel. From that we can probably assume that the Sekimeiya has an effective range around itself. You think so? Well, even though you were picked up too, it's not like the people in the attic traveled. This means that there was a specific distance from the Sekimeiya in which people could travel if activated. The first time it was shorter, which is why Sai didn't travel. If that's the case, it could be related to the distance traveled, because it also increased between both travels. That was my first thought too. The first time I went 20 minutes into the past and Sai, who was a few steps behind me, wasn't picked up by the range. Then I went back 40 minutes into the past and you, who were a bit farther away, traveled along. Both times before traveling I felt a painful burn on my fingers for a split second. The Sekimeiya was very hot. I believe the second time it was stronger, so that could be tied to this as well. Inside its cabinet, the Sekimeiya is kept cold. Once it's removed, it begins to get progressively hotter at an unnatural rate. This is similar to what Sai thought earlier. After traveling, I paid attention to the room where we found the Sekimeiya, but I didn't see anyone hiding it there. We don't know how long it had been there for, but it should have been outside the cabinet for longer than the first time. It could be something like that, yeah. The distance traveled, the range around it, and how long it's kept outside the cabinet could all increment slowly as soon as the Sekimeiya is away from a regulated temperature. The place we teleport to still needs to be completely unrelated though. Despite everything, I'm not sure if something else is needed, given how we got it out and nothing happened when we touched it sometimes. It seems that when it's activated, the energy stored is released completely, and the Sekimeiya turns grey as it gets instantly cold again. I believe that it regains its normal appearance after some time, but exposing it to a cold temperature might accelerate that, like we saw. I'm saying this because the Sai I met had the Sekimeiya on him, and it went from grey to white before putting it in the cabinet. I still don't follow what you're saying about this Sai. We should go up already to see what he's been doing, since he kept trying to make the others think we were suspicious for going down. Yeah, but hang on a second. I hadn't fully explained to her what I'd lived upon traveling to the past. The big mystery I'd experienced was still the culprit having vanished from the bathroom, without having been able to touch the Sekimeiya. I'd gotten to the conclusion that most likely the bathroom had been completely empty when we'd seen Naomi's second body. And we'd just learned of a supposed range. It would let someone travel without the need of touching the Sekimeiya, but they'd need to be close to it. Since at that point the Sekimeiya had been in its cabinet, such a thing couldn't have applied. I was in front of the bathroom when it was locked, so if that was when the culprit disappeared, it would have teleported me as well, alongside the others in the event room, assuming the source was there. After we heard the sound, we first searched through hallway A. During that time, is it possible that someone used the Sekimeiya and the range encompassed the culprit in the bathroom? Given that we still found it inside the cabinet after finding the second Naomi, that doesn't seem possible. But there might have been a way. According to Shiriya, she returned to room B3 and found the Sekimeiya in the cabinet where I'd activated it, and at that point Sai had a disabled Sekimeiya in his hip pack. It's possible that there were two Sekimeiya at the same time. While the culprit was locked in the bathroom, could it be that someone made them escape with another Sekimeiya? Someone who remained in hallway B, maybe? Could it have been achieved from the second floor? And then did that unknown person and the culprit escape to the past? If so, where the hell have they been all this time? This concept of range must be the start to explain what happened, but there are barriers to understanding it. Before we go up, let's check the Sekimeiya. Kate might get unreasonably angry if we don't leave it in the cabinet, and something's still really strange. What is? Well, Sai was holding a powered-off Sekimeiya in his hip pack right when we both traveled. So two Sekimeiya existed at that point. If the past wasn't changed at all, yes, Sai seemed legitimately surprised to see himself holding it, but it's ridiculous to think that it was put there without him noticing. Even if he'd somehow traveled from the future holding it, he should have been conscious that he had it. Well, you say that, what about the recorder earlier? How would you appear holding it though? It doesn't really sound possible, which is why I can't think of anything. However, consider this. Right now, more than one Sekimeiya might exist. Having two, you could bring one to the past, you just need to be holding one while you touch the other. However, this can't be the answer. The second one would have spawned out of nowhere. We entered the event room, where that Sai and I had left his Sekimeiya. Okay, are we actually gonna continue? There we go. However, the cabinet was empty. Oh? What? What's wrong? Right, I didn't mention it, but the Sekimeiya Sai had been holding, we put it here. Then did he? Instead of answering, I opened the opposite door and entered to the room we'd traveled from. You closed the glass again. Did you also put the cushion back in place? Yes. It had been left out, so I put it back with the Sekimeiya under it so that it wouldn't stand out. I didn't want to touch it, and I thought you had to be nearby. I went ahead and grabbed it. It didn't take me long to confirm that nothing was below it. It's not here. Yeah, Sai must have taken it. Both of them. He had the perfect chance and alibi. After escaping, he must have come here. Maybe he hid it somewhere else. Really? What's he trying to do? I don't know, but he might have 2 Sekimeiya at his disposal. If he travels to the past holding one, he could appear where I saw him and explain the existence of it. But, like you said, this is a paradox, right? The other Sekimeiya has no origin, and him traveling with it is what allowed him to travel with it. Which is why I think there has to be more to it. We need to go talk to him. Shiriya agreed, so I put the cushion into place before leaving. Since the elevator should have still been out of commission, we took the stairs up. In just a minute, we were in front of the top staircase. Before stepping inside the attic, I asked Shiriya to hold up. I looked at these footprints before leaving. They've all degraded, but I believe these are new. I pointed at the pair of footprints that looked more prominent. You can tell? These should be mine since I was the last person to leave the attic. They fit. I thought so, meaning that nobody else entered or left through this door apart from you. We walked in. Nobody was in the living room, but faint voices could be heard coming from the bedroom where we'd been. Upon opening the door, 5 pairs of eyes fixed themselves on us, and Sai took the initiative to begin speaking without letting anyone else react. Hey you two, did you enjoy your 50-minute trip downstairs? What the hell were you doing? We were getting worried. Why did you leave without saying anything? Well, we went to check if the Sekimeiya was where we thought it would be. What? Oh, we left it in a cabinet. Where else would it be? And that doesn't take 50 minutes. Before we explain ourselves, let me request something. Sai, can you show me your wristwatch? What? Do you want to know the time? It's 12:37. No, just show it to me. Do you not believe me? Look. He turned his wrist around. That was the time displayed on the watch's screen along with the correct date, 2011, 12:15. Did you just set the date back to normal? What do you mean? Why would I need to change it? Forget it. When we went down, we found the Sekimeiya in room B3 after seeing the cabinet in the event room empty. What? That's impossible. We all instinctively looked at Akuro, who seemed like the only person who could have done it, but he denied such an accusation. Then we told them about our respective travels, about seeing Sai on the crystal floor with a disabled Sekimeiya, about being unable to find Shiriya for a while, about having come to the attic, and about his escape. It all amounted to the 50 minutes we'd been gone for, even though for us we'd been gone for about an hour and 30 minutes. This is a ridiculous story you're making up. You hit the Sekimeiya and are now trying to blame me. It can't be. Sai was here the whole time. Are you sure? Did he ever have the time to go down? No, he didn't leave. Sai, do you really not know what I'm talking about? I have no clue. If that's the case, you'll eventually travel back to the past and experience what I said. I'm sorry, but that won't happen. You've said that you spotted me in hallway A, so if I ever go back to the past, I'll avoid being seen. You've told me what happened, so you've made sure I won't ever let it occur. If I travel to the past, I'll quickly check my hip pack, so there's no way I won't know I had the Sekimeiya there. This proves you're just making it all up. I didn't know how to refute that. If he was truly unaware of what had happened downstairs, he couldn't live what I'd experienced unless he lost his memory of having been told the events. After all, when I'd seen Sai, he'd looked legitimately surprised to see me, because I shouldn't have been there. If the Sai in front of me traveled, he wouldn't know about it, causing that reaction to be either impossible or fake. I just remembered he asked who's Shiriya. Maybe that wasn't a joke. Maybe he genuinely lost his memories shortly before that travel or during that travel. You know, Atsuki, are you sure you're not just creating an alibi for Shiriya? She seems like the most suspicious person to me, given what you told us. I'm sorry? Shiriya frowned too. How was she any more suspicious than I was? This version of myself you describe, it just seems like your imagination. I was here the whole time, so what's with the Sai that appears down there without a reason and holding the Sekimeiya to clearly let you know he was up to something? Shiriya went back to the past according to what you say. She knew where to hide the Sekimeiya and was the only one who could have done it. She also wasn't where you'd agreed you'd meet, right? This version of myself you saw, who couldn't have existed, is nothing but an excuse to remove suspicion from her. Am I wrong? You're being ridiculous. If anything, I now know you're very aware of what I saw, or else you would have suspected both of us. You know my story is true. Don't act like a smartass. I just chose to suspect her before you. Are you sure you can really trust her that much? Remember, didn't she have the cabinet key in her purse? I also remember that she couldn't have hidden the Sekimeiya in the storeroom. That's true. Unfortunately, nobody else could have, which means that someone who appears not to have been able to do it did it anyway. What if it was her? Don't look at me like that. You're the two people who left us without saying a word, and now you claim the Sekimeiya disappeared from the cabinet. Either you two are responsible, or only one is. I was only trying to trust you, Atsuki. I'm going to make this very clear for you, Sai. Don't try to push her around. You can say what you want about Kate, even about me, but you'd seriously better think twice before you go accusing her. She's done nothing wrong. In fact, she's the last person who would ever try to take advantage of this incident, right after me. I don't follow. You don't need to. Sometimes you just need to be quiet and listen. I still can't believe this is all for real. Are you two being serious? Did you travel through time? Atsuki said it before, but... Yes, now I'm sure. There's no other explanation for what we experienced. I'm completely certain. Somehow the Sekimeiya has that power. Listen, if I'd hidden a device that lets me travel to the past, I'd currently be buying yesterday's lottery ticket, not hanging around here. The rules seem a bit volatile, so perhaps you're not aware of them. Something led me to believe that the Sai I'd met had never traveled before. Your purpose might be to experiment with it, or to try to leave this building with it. Did you lose your mind? How would I exit and keep it? Earlier, at one point, 2 copies of the Sekimeiya might have existed at once. I'm not sure how that came to happen, but by hiding only one, you could lead Ashia to believe the Sekimeiya hadn't been stolen, while keeping the other one hidden to later retrieve it. Well, unfortunately, the second Sekimeiya is just part of your imagination. It can't exist, and it seems both of them vanished. We won't take any of this seriously when it comes from the most likely person to be behind this new disappearance. Do you no longer think an unknown culprit is behind this? That's still the second most likely possibility, along with Akuro. It wasn't me, I promise. We must go down. If someone hid it again, we should be able to find it just like before. That's true. We keep repeating this, but the cameras are still working. They will eventually expose everything to the police. Akuro seemed to have gone back to his normal self. He was probably right, but a culprit with time-traveling knowledge might not have cared much about that. Do we need to? We can just stay here where we're more comfortable. I'm not fond of staying with people I know are plotting something, and there's more than one of you. Let's go see what these two are talking about. We agreed to go then. Meanwhile, I kept debating it. Was the sign next to us the one I'd seen on the crystal floor? If so, how had he managed to trick all of us? Because if he wasn't, the origin of the extra psi remained as the hardest mystery to solve, alongside his motive actions. Had 2 Sekimeiya ever existed at the same time? Was it still the case? And if so, how had it happened? I hoped we'd shortly have a better idea of all that, but in the meantime I kept running through my previous thoughts. We were just 4 hours into our imprisonment, and questions hadn't stopped piling up into a seemingly incomprehensible mess. Before leaving the attic, we made sure nobody else was there. The elevator was still open, and we left it that way. As we moved down the floors, we kept entering the partitions, and when we were done with the ones on floor 2, nobody could have been above us. Once again, only the crystal floor remained. All of us went to the event room, leaving Eren and Isla by hallway A to watch the stairs like before. Shiriya and I had left the curtain uncovered, so everyone else immediately saw the empty interior. Atsuki, be aware that if this is your doing, Ashia will figure it out. That's fine, we had nothing to do with it. It must have been Sai. We waited a couple seconds for his denial, but it never came. Wait, is he not here? We turned around to find out that Sai wasn't with us. Shiriya, next to the other door we'd left open, peeked at hallway B. Where are you going? Sai didn't reply. When I looked at the hallway, I saw him in front of a door. Even though he'd heard us, he ignored our call and disappeared off to hallway C. What the fuck is he doing now? Kate gestured at Erina to stay in the opposite hallway. Shiriya and I were interested in the room Sai had been next to, so we approached it with Kate behind us. Sai, come here. Where did you go? Shiriya reached the door first and opened it. Inside was the cleaning room. I wasn't sure what Sai had been about to do, but we'd seen him standing in front of the door. Shiriya and I entered, while Kate continued toward hallway C in pursuit of him. He stopped himself, but I saw his arm about to open his door. He was definitely going to go in here. There was only one reason why. He must have hidden the Sekimeiya there and wanted to activate it. If he'd done that, he could have disappeared without us noticing it. Shiriya was looking around while I questioned Sai's ambiguous action. If he'd hidden the Sekimeiya in that room, I wasn't sure why he'd left upon realizing that we'd seen him. He should have given up, but instead he'd gone off to hallway C. Before I had time to think about it, the dim environment around me changed. A large light was illuminating the much more comforting scenery. I felt no confusion that time, as I realized immediately that I had teleported to the living room in the attic. This is getting too crazy. What the fuck happened now? I knew I had traveled, but I hadn't been the one to activate the Sekimeiya. It didn't catch me completely off guard since I'd already learned that was possible. That meant that I must have been in the range of the Sekimeiya. It had most likely been in the cleaning room. And Shiriya must have been the one to activate it, meaning that she should have also appeared somewhere. How far did I go this time? Once I thought that, I considered some implications of what had happened. The past hour had been very dense. Sai managed to appear and disappear, and Shiriya had investigated every floor. That meant somehow we'd remained unseen the entire time, assuming that she traveled too. I looked behind me and saw that the door to the staircase was open. Drawn to my noise, a figure appeared from the hallway. It was Shiriya with a disoriented expression. "Oh, you're here. What time is it?" "No idea. You just traveled from the cleaning room, right?" "Yes, you did too?" "I did. I appeared here, so I don't know the time." "I see. I thought I'd seen something inside the cleaning cart. I reached out for it and I suddenly felt pain and appeared in this hallway. I think there was something else pretty small and dark next to the Sekimeiya, but I didn't get to see what it was." "So I did get caught in your travel." "Regarding your question, I think I might know the time approximately. The staircase door is open, so this is past the time we unlocked the attic. There are a bunch of footprints next to the door, but I don't see ours. This must mean that you and I haven't gone down yet. These are probably the ones that we left after going back up when we found Akro in the bathroom. We're not before that point, since there are too many." "Then right now we're all in the bedroom?" "Most likely. I think we should hurry." "What do you mean?" I started moving toward the hallway as I explained it. I whispered to her. "Earlier, you said that you followed the group up, and when you got to the attic, Kate and Sai were already in the bedroom telling us about the letter they'd found. This is happening now, so we're about to head downstairs, and your past self, who's hiding in the floor 6 partitions right now, will come." "That's right, yeah, and we weren't seen." We hadn't left any footprints right in front of the door. The ones around the room would blend in with the others, making it unnoticeable that we'd appeared there. In a few minutes, Sai and I would also arrive, and that past me wouldn't pay any mind to those footprints. "Do we take the elevator?" Its door was open. If Shiriya was on floor 6, she'd probably hear it, and she had said that it hadn't been used once. I denied it, but not only because of that. By going down, we would have been seen by my other self, who was looking around for Akuro on the crystal floor. During the following minutes, Shiriya and I had inspected every floor and managed to miss each other. I'm not sure what we should do. Hiding from ourselves purely because we didn't see anyone in the past seems pointless and kind of ridiculous, but the only place in which we'll be unspotted will be on this floor. I still don't get how it's pointless and kind of ridiculous. Why not just try? You know? Try what happens. "Yeah, we should probably stay here. Maybe we'll be able to understand what Sai did too. It would explain so many things." She was right, and we had 3 places to choose. The elevator, the storeroom, and the other bedroom. We knew every other place would be entered eventually, so of course we chose the more spacious bedroom. As we headed there, our bodies froze for a second. Coming from the bedroom where our past selves must have been, we heard footsteps approaching us. We knew we had to speed up, so we opened the opposite door and closed it slowly to avoid making noise. "What do we do?" In a quiet voice, Shiriya asked the same question I had. It was my 3rd trip through time, but that instance didn't seem like we'd get much out of it, given how Shiriya had already witnessed the attic the previous travel. "Was this door closed while you watched from the hallway?" "Yes." We should just stay here then. It's hard to believe anything important will happen, but we didn't come back until 50 minutes after we left, so we might have to be here a while. I see. It was a bit frustrating, because the only reason we couldn't head down and suss out the situation was that we'd already done that. We couldn't easily exist on a lower floor. Traveling under those circumstances had turned out to be a literal waste of time, but something was piquing my curiosity. Even though there shouldn't have been danger around us, we didn't feel safe staying there because our existence could have been revealed by simply opening the door. That was why we went up the ladder and sat on a bed above, where we could speak without being easily heard. I took a pillow and shook it, removing a bit of dust from the cover. It wasn't hygienic in the slightest, but I rested my head on it since my body strongly demanded it. While Shiriya did the same, we were startled by a sound. As was becoming common, it was the sound of a door closing, and it came from the hallway. It must be us. Right, we'll be back in 50 minutes then. Before that thought could become too overwhelming, I began speaking about a detail that I'd noticed. So, Sai had most likely hidden the Sekimeiya in the cleaning cart. He must have wanted to either activate it or move it. I'm not sure why, but he knew a search was coming. He might have hidden 2 Sekimeiya, right? Since I never got to see it, it's possible there were 2 inside the cart. The plastic bag and the light being dim meant I couldn't really see inside it, and I only noticed something strange when I saw a glow coming from the inside. I see. You did feel a burn, didn't you? Yes, when I made contact with the Sekimeiya, it disappeared as soon as I changed places. Precisely. I think this means that our bodies now aren't the same ones we traveled with. If they were, the burn would still persist, and you'd feel it. I suppose so. We must have gone about an hour to the past. I'm not sure if this is a coincidence, but that's 20 minutes more than my second travel. First, I went 20 minutes back, then 40, and now we might have gone an hour back. Every subsequent travel has had an incremental increase of 20 minutes. But I activated the Sekimeiya this time, and this is only my second time. I know, which is why I still think it could be coincidence. Remember what we thought earlier? That the time travel is dependent on the amount of time the Sekimeiya is not in the cold? That might remain consistent. I'd say we traveled at approximately 12:40. Our previous travel was at 11:50, and after that you saw the Sekimeiya had powered off. That Sekimeiya shouldn't have been put in the cabinet again, so if it's the one you activated, it must have been out of the cabinet for a long time. Right, so we would have gone this far back. But the origin of the Sai I saw downstairs still doesn't make sense. He must have traveled to the past at some point to appear there, but if he did it between this time span, he would have reset the Sekimeiya. You didn't see him going down from the attic, and neither did the others. I can't figure out what happened with him. Can't he just go back to the past after 12:40? Yes, but if that's what happened, it means that his surprise at seeing me was fake and that he knew everything that would occur. I really don't think that's what happened. Well, there's still the Sekimeiya he had in his hip pack, right? Maybe he traveled using that one. I can't say, since the origin of that Sekimeiya is a mystery in itself. If he did use that one, it must have been somewhere else when we traveled from the cleaning room. It could be that Sai ignored us to go use that one instead. Both of us sighed. There was no actual reason why we had to figure any of it out, but we felt the need to. The possibility of spending a very long time there had forced its way in front of us. And if we knew what was going on, the thought might have been a bit more bearable. On the other hand, it was also useful to have information that could protect us. Shiriya had apparently recovered somewhat from her grief at Naomi's death, but I was sure it was due to absurdity. Someone dying twice made the whole thing seem surreal. I spoke again after a few seconds, as I hadn't yet explained what had piqued my curiosity about our travel. The place we teleport to has seemed random every travel. Since we believe the amount of time traveled isn't at all random though, it's hard to believe the place would be. You thought of something? Not exactly, but I appeared in the living room while you appeared in the hallway. There was a time when those were our locations, right? Definitely not an hour before we traveled, right? At that point we were all in the other bedroom. Oh, you mean later? Yes, when I explained to the others what Sai and I had done downstairs, I mentioned that we'd briefly come to the attic. I didn't elaborate on that, but we came to grab a battery. At that point, you were in the hallway listening to the conversation going on. That coincides with the locations we appeared at, right? I think so. I didn't notice you two back then since I was paying close attention to the bedroom. That must have indicated something. At first glance, the appearing location might have seemed like something trivial, but with how many things didn't make sense, understanding smaller mysteries could work well to decipher others. For example, if we figured out what determined our arriving location in the future, we could know where we'd appear if we were to touch the Sekimeiya. That could help us decide if traveling purposely would be a good idea. Oh, so where we appeared might have been related to that one time. We went an hour to the past, and at around 12:10 both of us were in the attic, right? That would hold up, I think. That's around when Sai and I went to the living room. Well, you said we traveled at around 12:40, so to 11:40. This means that 12:10 was the middle point. Oh, you're right. I thought about it and quickly found direct contradictions. It's not consistent though. The location we appear at is determined by the midpoint of the distance traveled. It sounds promising, but it only happened during this travel. The first time I appeared in hallway A. I went 20 minutes to the past, so at the midpoint before traveling, 10 minutes later, I must have been next to the stairs, being told that the Sekimeiya had disappeared from the cabinet for the first time. However, now that I think about it, around 5 minutes later, at 15 out of those 20, I was in the hallway keeping watch from the lobby while the others looked through every room. That's pretty much where I appeared, so it could actually have been that position. I see, so you appeared where you were at 3/4 of the distance traveled? I have no idea. I said I was there 15 minutes after the point I appeared, but I can't be sure about the exact number of minutes. This falls apart in the second travel though. We went 40 minutes to the past and I appeared in the security room while you appeared in the floor 2 partitions. Not only that, but I was sitting down in mid-air. We traveled from 11:50 to 11:10, and during those 40 minutes I was never in the security room. We just found the second Naomi and moved back and forth between the attic and the crystal floor. Yeah, during that time I never entered the second floor's partitions either. Well, before we found Akko in the bathroom, we came down from the attic and searched every floor, but I didn't step very far into the partitions since everyone else was looking too. I appeared deep into the second one, so it can't be from that time. So we can't get anywhere with this. Appearing where both of us were at 12:10 might have been a coincidence, but if it wasn't, I have no idea what determined it. As I said that, I thought of another valuable thing we could get out of figuring out what determined the appearing location. We were dealing with Sai and the culprit who had traveled with the Sekimeiya. If the arriving location somehow depended on a previous location, we could know where someone had been in the past if we knew the location they'd appeared in, effectively drawing information out of them. I couldn't apply it to Sai, since I hadn't seen him appearing anywhere, but it might have been something to keep in mind in the future. Go on. After that, the silence persisted. Both of us lay down completely and gave our bodies their needed rest. We had 50 blank minutes in which our existences were isolated from the rest of the world, so we weren't in any type of hurry. My eyes closed and I realized that I was a lot more tired than I'd thought. I'd been awake for over 20 hours. As soon as I thought that, it all came back to me. How we'd spent our past week and everything about Mia. I couldn't see Shiriya's face, but her immobile body gave away that she was exhausted too. Our deep breathing became background noise as I subconsciously reminisced about how our life had been until recently. I knew none of that would go back to the way it was, but even though I had already accepted it, I still felt the same sharp pain every time I acknowledged the truth. And instead of moving through things normally, the Sekimeiya had appeared before us. It was still a ridiculous thought, but I travelled back through time more than once. Such a thing was real and very ironic. During the past 2 weeks, I pointlessly thought about it a number of times. If only I could go back in time. Every time something negative of significance had occurred in my life, I'd resorted to these pointless thoughts. They were necessary though, as immersing myself in a better world often seemed to temporarily alleviate the pain. While I thought of a world in which Mia hadn't met such an abrupt end, I could successfully depart from the real one briefly. The only way to truly achieve that, I'd thought, was by travelling through time and avoiding the path that led to her death. And then, as if the universe was laughing in our faces, time travel had become possible right in front of us. However, instead of reopening the door to the normal world, it had created a tangled mess, threatening to trap us in the tower for weeks. Not only that, but it seemed that even if we managed to solve every riddle surrounding the Sekimeiya, it would be useless for us. Changing the past was not possible. Travelling back would just form a loop. If we were right about the power storage, left the Sekimeiya out of the cold temperature for a very long time and traveled more than 2 weeks to the past, we wouldn't be able to change anything. Perhaps that wasn't the real way to put it. Something would prevent us from traveling like that in the first place, as it was an impossibility. Or maybe we travel and suffer an accident before we could try to defy reality. You don't know any of that, you're just making assumptions. There was no way Shiriya hadn't thought of it already. If we went back prior to Mia's death, we'd just have to suffer it again from another angle. In my head, as my consciousness slowly dissipated more and more, it all sounded like a ridiculous story I was making up. In reality though, many time travel stories revolved around going back to the past to prevent an incident from taking place. Be it to save a person or save humanity, I wasn't the creator of that idea, even though it might have been present within every person, as haphazardly thinking of going back in time after a bad experience was very common. I laughed inwardly because something else usually present in those stories had occurred in the incident of 2 weeks ago. Mia's body hadn't been found. But I would have already jumped into all sorts of theories if it had only been that. In fact though, Mia's body couldn't have been found. It had disappeared in the blink of an eye due to the explosion that had taken her life. Despite that, parts of her had been quickly found. Her jaw had confirmed her identity with zero chance of doubt. Her clothes had been found all over the place as well, and it hadn't been anything short of a miracle that Shiriya and I had made it out safely without critical injuries. That was why thinking about giving another meaning to the past was also futile. It was the only way to get around causal loops. Going back to the past to explain what had happened in a different way. Lamentably, her jaw had been found, preventing that completely. I was aware that I was about to fall asleep. I didn't want to, but I also couldn't resist it. I didn't know if Shiriya had already given up, that she hadn't moved in a while. Can I not go back to the past, save Mia, and threaten the forensic technicians to say that they found her jaw? Such delusions were nothing but that. Had I already saved Mia? Of course not. I often used to be optimistic as I fell asleep, and I'd realize how foolish I'd been immediately after waking up. In reality, I'd personally seen pieces of her clothes with burned skin stuck to them. I could have very slightly embellished it by thinking that they could have belonged to someone else and that Mia had already been saved by one of my future travels, but I knew that the flesh I'd seen had truly belonged to her, no matter how many imaginary scenarios I intended to make up. Okay, that's kind of weird. The next thought I had was very different. I fell asleep. And that is where we'll end today's episode of the Sekimeiya Spun Glass. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys again next time. Till then, bye.